You know that meeting that you've been putting off? The one that has been on your to-do list for months. You know that it is important. You think about it, you talk about it, and maybe you've even drafted that initial meeting invitation. But for some reason, it still has not happened. This is not a motivation problem. It is not a character flaw. It is a gap. The gap between what you intend to do and what you actually do. Today, I want to talk to you about what it looks like when a leader finally closes that gap. I'm Dr. James Bryant, and you are listening to the Engineer Your Success podcast.
Success isn't just about what you achieve. It's about living a life that reflects your values and priorities. Welcome to Engineer Your Success, the podcast that helps you lead with intention and live fulfilled.
Welcome to Engineer Your Success. I'm your host, Dr. James Bryant, your guide to designing and living a life where you are winning at work and at home. Today's topic is something that I have observed over the years of working with engineers and technical leaders. When there is a gap between what you intend to do and what you actually do, it's rarely about talent, drive, or work ethic. That gap is almost always about whether you have an intentional design, a system that consistently closes the distance between intention and action. For this episode, I want to focus on a coaching story based on a client that I've worked with for several years. For the purposes of this episode, we are going to call her Debbie. So let me tell you a little bit about Debbie. She is a regional engineer with over 20 years of experience. She manages a small, geographically dispersed team, some newer hires that she's brought on herself, and there's some tenured staff which she inherited on her team. She's a single mother and a professional engineer. She has led programs and staff before, but in this role, she has much more visibility across the entire organization. So in some ways, she is still figuring out what her leadership looks like in this role. During some of our work together, one item kept surfacing on her success blueprint. Now, this is a process that I take my clients through to help them focus on what success looks like at work and at home during this stage of life and in this stage of their career. One of the things that kept coming up was regular team meetings and one-on-ones with her staff. We would discuss it, list it as an action item, and still nothing was happening. I guess something was happening, but what we wanted to happen wasn't happening. Now, she's a high performer, so I knew that something else had to be getting in the way. During one of our sessions, we decided to focus on this directly. And here's part of that conversation. Debbie, you keep mentioning these meetings. You say that these meetings are important to you. Help me understand why these meetings are important. She said, I want my team to feel supported. I want to know what they're working on, where they're stuck, and how I can help before things become a problem. I know we need more real touch points, not just emails and fire drills. When I asked what was holding her back from having these meetings, the answers were predictable. The schedule's too full, the timing's not right, the team's calendars are not lining up, the language of the invitation really needs to be perfect. But I sensed again that there was more going on, so I pushed a little deeper. What's your real hesitation here? She got quiet, thought a minute, and said, well, there's also this one team member. And I asked her to tell me more about this team member. She responded, he's one of the employees that I inherited. He's an older gentleman. You know, James, he went around me to another executive on the project. Every conversation feels like an opening move in a negotiation, and not one that I'm going to win. I even time my emails so he can't show up at my door. Whoa. I asked, is there a reason why you don't want him to show up at your door? She says, I know that it's going to mess up the rest of my day. That floored me. So I looked at Debbie and I asked, how often are you carrying that feeling, even when you're not talking to him? She thought for a moment and said, most days. My next question was, how well has your approach been working to help you accomplish your goals? It's not working at all. We begin to then discuss the whole concept that avoidance is not a successful strategy to help you execute on your goals. And as we continued our conversation, it led to something that was even deeper. And she noted that I've been in this role for 2 years. What are they going to think if I start doing these meetings now? My question to her is, what do you think it says about you as a leader if you don't start having these meetings now? You believe that they're important. You've articulated that they're important. So what does it say about you and your leadership if you're not starting now? She paused and said, it says that I'm letting my own discomfort lead instead of choosing what I know is the best for the organization and my team. The weight of not having done it sooner had quietly been one of the reasons not to do it at all. As an engineer, we would never let the cost of a delayed decision become the justification for an indefinite delay on a critical project. But that's exactly what was happening in her leadership. Another part of what was keeping her stuck was the picture that she had built in her mind. She was not just worried about the 2-year gap. She was convinced that this team member would drive the whole thing sideways, that he would push back, question her authority, and she would walk out having lost credibility. She could see that meeting failing before it even happened. So we started building a different vision by asking different questions. So here's some of the questions that we went through. What if your team actually wants this interaction? What if they've been wondering when you were going to actually bring them all together and have these kinds of meetings? What if the person you're most worried about turns out to be the easiest one in the room? And, the biggest question that came up in this conversation is, what does success look like when you conduct this meeting? So what's your vision of what that looks like? And she mirrored many of the items that she used to describe the importance of the meeting, that her team feels heard. She has a clear picture of what each person is working on, what is getting in their way, what they need, and that the tenured employee she had been dreading, that she walks out of this meeting with a real working relationship with that team member. That was the picture that we began to design toward. We did not pretend that the fear was gone or that those other consequences couldn't happen, but we just put another picture on the table beside it. I like to say that we covered over the old picture. We walked through the meeting agenda, the send ahead materials, all of the logistical details. And then I asked her to schedule the meeting while we were still on our call. Not put it on your calendar, not next week, but schedule it right now. Let's put the first stake in the ground before we hang up. And I waited. And then you know what? I waited some more as she went back and forth and was talking through some of the frustrations of trying to get everything scheduled. But you know what? She scheduled it. In that moment, it was unglamorous. It was slightly frustrating, logically messy. But that was the moment when the meeting went from a good ideal to an actual event on the calendar. The question was no longer whether to have the meeting. It was, how do you want to show up for it? And you know what? Afterwards, she told me, you are not going to believe what happened. Her tenured employee, the one whose anticipated reaction had been controlling her calendar for months, sat with her after the meeting just to talk about his thinking on a different project. She said, He sat down and said, I needed to get this out. She listened and he finished and thanked her. And his interaction in the meeting was great. I mean, he was there to support the other team members. He was reporting out on his project, and everybody really enjoyed this get together and the fact that they were able to talk about the project. Again, there was no confrontation, no power struggle. And you know what? The team voted unanimously to have monthly all hands meetings. They also asked for the individual one-on-ones because they were genuinely excited about having FaceTime with their leader. And here's what I want you to notice. What grew was not just Debbie. The meeting opened up the team itself. Her newer and tenured employees started talking to each other. Information that had been siloed started moving. The tenured employee that she had dreaded turned out to be just as engaged and curious and deeply invested in the work. In some ways, she never would have known had this meeting not happened. So after the meeting, my question was, what will you do differently the next time? She said, I'm going to give them more space, ask better questions, and listen more. And so she adjusted, she protected the time on the calendar, and she kept the rhythm going and kept refining it. This is what it looks like when you are able to win by design. It is not perfect. It is not linear, but it is intentional. Debbie, she had the talent, she had the drive. What she did not have was a framework or system to help her intentionally win by design. And by design, I do not mean a plan on paper. I mean having an intentional system for closing the gap between what you intend and what is actually happening in your leadership in life. Because winning by design really means that you're making deliberate choices about your leadership instead of letting circumstances, other people's reactions, or the accumulated weight of what you have not done make those choices for you. Debbie wasn't following a formal model when we worked through this together. But looking back at this conversation and years of working with engineers and technical leaders, I kept seeing a familiar pattern show up in the gap between intention and action. Eventually, I used that pattern as the foundation of what I call the design framework. What a framework gives you is a way to intentionally make winning repeatable so that the next time you face a gap, you're not starting over. You have a structure to work from. So here's the framework. D is for decide. Making the choice the situation actually requires, not just the comfortable one. Debbie had to decide, one, that she had the right to lead before anything else could move. She also had to decide to move past her discomfort in having the meeting to do what was required for the organization and the team. And that was having these team meetings and the one-on-ones. E is for envision, seeing the outcome with enough specificity to design towards it. So we had to put a different picture on the table beside the one that she feared. She feared that the meeting was going to go off the rails, and we had to envision, what does it look like if this meeting was a success, or what does success look like in this situation? S is for strategize, building the path between where you are and what you have envisioned. That was the agenda, the send ahead materials, the different approaches for newer and tenured staff. I is integrate, bringing that design into your actual calendar and your habits. So that's a combination of scheduling the meeting, the exercises of thinking, what does success look like? The habits of following up after the meeting. All of those things is how you integrate these one-on-ones into her overall system or the overall approach that she's going to have there at work. G is for grow, developing the capacity in yourself and the people around you and paying attention to what those results are telling you. That's what happened in the room and what happened to the whole team. N is for nourish. And that's really protecting the rhythm and sustaining yourself and the system, right? So that it can actually function. And so that was Debbie deciding that she was going to show up differently the next time in the meeting because she wanted to nourish the outcome that meeting was going to produce. I'll be talking more about this philosophy and approach and what it looks like in real leadership situations through the Win by Design newsletter. So every issue is a practical, structured approach to leadership and life built for people who want something that they can actually act on. The link is in the show notes, or you can go to winbydesign.co. I would love to have you as part of this founding audience. And before you go, I want to flip the mic. This is where you become the interviewer and I become the interviewee. What's one question that you have for me? Hey, I know that you can't ask me a question right now, but you can use the link in the show notes and go to Ask James Anything. And you can leave your one question there and it may show up in a future episode. This is Dr. James Bryant, the coach in your corner. And I want you to be great this week and win by design, not by accident. Thanks.